Welcome to the Adaptation, Planning and Practices online training, brought to you by the USDA Northern Forest Climate Hub and the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about climate change communication and describe some strategies you can use to better connect with your audience about climate change topics. We designed this lecture because we recognize that climate change can add an additional, complex layer to communicating the hows and whys of your new management plan. We want you to be prepared for those potentially difficult conversations. Professionals are increasingly expected to integrate climate change into plans, documents, and activities. There is a strong need to both understand climate change information and communicate about it effectively to diverse audiences who have different experiences with climate change. In your role, you may be talking to any number of audiences, including timber industry professionals, small woodlot owners, wildlife biologists, tribal partners, or the general public. Each audience has varying questions, concerns, values, and perceptions when it comes to climate change. Some of these climate change conversations may revolve around stakeholder-driven concerns on public lands, prescriptive agency policies and guidance, or long-term economic forecasts. Since your audiences will differ, your conversations may look different too. But there are a few standard tips to guide you through these types of conversations. To prepare you, we've curated a collection of the most widely recommended climate change communication strategies provided by organizations like the International Panel on Climate Change, Yale, and the United Nations. We hope that learning and applying these strategies will make you a more confident climate change communicator and allow you to effectively share the knowledge you have gained about climate change as it relates to your field. The first step is to know and connect with your audience. If we know our audience, we can better support them and can even empower them to make changes that are beneficial for both them and the climate. I imagine the kind of general term audience means something different to everyone here today. As we move through this, I encourage you to consider how you might apply the lessons learned to an audience that you may already have, or an audience you may be interested in or see value in engaging with but don't currently. An important aspect of knowing your audience is performing research, whether formally or informally, to better understand their belief systems. The Yale Program on Climate Change Communication has conducted many surveys and studies over the years and have determined that our audiences tend to fall into one of 6 distinct categories pertaining to belief in global warming or climate change. These 6 categories are alarmed, concerned, cautious, disengaged, doubtful, and dismissive, in order from most to least believing. The most recent results displayed here suggest that around 70% of the population falls into the 3 higher belief categories, while the 3 lower belief categories make up a much smaller portion. So, even though it may feel at times like the American public is dominated by climate change deniers or skeptics, it seems that the majority actually agree that climate change is a problem that needs to be addressed. It's important to keep in mind, though, that climate change perceptions varies by location in the country. If you visit the link on the right, you can zoom in to see how your state or county compares to the nation. Beyond understanding people's beliefs about climate change, it is important to learn about what they value as it relates to your management. Take time to identify what your community cares about and try to define what values they possess based on that something of interest. Ask questions like, why does my audience care about this place? What hobbies do my audience engage in, and what makes those most important to them? How would losing access to this natural resource affect my audience? Asking these or similar questions can guide your thinking about the what and why behind your audience's values and decision making. The next step is reaching your audience. So, how can you use what you know about your audience's beliefs and values to communicate with them in a way that they resonate with? In this section, I'll address that question by describing some strategies for authentic and dynamic climate change communication that you can employ when connecting with new or existing audiences. One key way to connect with your audience is by simply showing up and listening. Whether that's through in-person events, reading people's writing, or looking into survey results, listening can help you identify what your audience thinks is important and can be the foundation for a sustained relationship, which makes having substantive discussions about climate change easier. Sometimes we view communication as a one-way transmission pathway for information sharing, where one knowledgeable individual shares what they know with those who are less knowledgeable about a given topic. This model of communication does not allow for knowledge exchange, which can be incredibly valuable in the climate change space. Consider instead how you might engage with your audience by listening first and sharing later to spark conversation. Oftentimes, people have unique insight to offer related to a particular place that was handed down across generations, cultivated through decades-long experience, or gained by working really closely with an area. The more time you invest in being present and actively listening, the more you'll be able to learn from your audience about their local reality. Note that some realities of climate change have profound emotional, spiritual, or aesthetic impacts, and these realities are just as important as temperature or precipitation trends. They define value and help inform our perceptions of risk and opportunity. When listening to and conversing with your audience, be sure to honor experience outside of your own and consider the value of your audience's know-how in your management. Additionally, remember to respect local decision-making, their place, their knowledge, their decision. It is also crucial to avoid fear, blame, and shame in your communication. Climate change can be overwhelming to talk about since it affects people constantly and disproportionately. To make conversations more productive and meet people where they are, discuss in a way that acknowledges their potential grief and focuses on shared goals and outcomes. Doing so can help break down isolated, powerless feelings and shift instead into building empowerment and inspiring action. In your roles as land managers and professionals, you can offer clarity and support to people who want to get involved in addressing climate change, or just understand what tangible steps exist to help the ecosystems and communities they care about. Use your communication opportunities to motivate positive action by building trust and showcasing ways to move forward. Some general rules to guide your conversation are: avoid making people feel powerless. Rather than emphasizing that we have to act fast, emphasize messages like, "We can do it." Show, don't tell. Demonstrating solutions through lived examples is more powerful than simply describing them. Use multi-pronged strategies. Keeping an open and creative mind can help you and your audience come up with innovative solutions. And finally, make yourself a trusted messenger. Be modest and be honest in all instances. Employing these strategies will help you to navigate climate change conversations in a way that uplifts rather than discourages, and may open up future opportunities for knowledge exchange. The next step is to tailor your messaging to your audience. To do this, you need to understand some basic information. For example, who am I talking to? What do they know? What do they want to know? And what do they care about and value? If you're communicating from a place that you live and work, you're likely already going to be familiar with many of the local issues had by your audience. If not, spend some time researching local issues and learning about the concerns and values of your audience. Maybe there are some recent disturbances or climate change trends that are likely to be on folks' mind in that area. It may be helpful to reach out ahead of time to determine what topics people are curious or concerned about, so that you can adjust your talking points as needed. The takeaway here is to always do your homework and to understand your audience. Don't assume anything and tailor your messaging to have the greatest impact. Doing so will help you center your communication on things your audience cares about and find intersections between their values and projected changes that can have a local impact. Collectively, climate change threatens local plant and animal beings or species, ecosystems, tribal sovereignty, the economy, and culture. So telling a story that links our values to climate change and describes how our interactions with the land may change in the future and for future generations is a great place to start. For example, let's say that you have a message you want to communicate about the impact of climate change on forests and wildlife, and you have a targeted audience made of anglers. How can you connect their values and interests to your message? Perhaps this group likes to be outdoors and values open spaces. Maybe they want reassurance that their favorite fishing spot stays just the way it is for their enjoyment. Given those observations, you might approach this group with information that will assist them in evaluating how fishing, habitats, and water quality may be affected by climate change. In your messaging, you might encourage them to identify the value that this location has and to participate in climate-informed activities to ensure they can continue enjoying it. Once you've tailored your message, the next step is to determine the most effective medium for communicating with your audience. While some audiences prefer in-person presentations and discussion, some may be intimidated by these mediums and instead prefer a virtual or read-on-your-own approach. Consider what mediums have been used to reach your audience in the past and what new mediums you might use. Sometimes the tried and true method is the best. Other times, innovation may be more effective. When applicable, you may want to ask your audience how they would like to receive information about climate change in the future. As we shared before, listening can be an incredibly valuable tool for understanding and reaching your audience. Also, no matter what medium you end up using, sources like Harvard and the International Panel on Climate Change highly recommend the use of visuals in your communication. Showcase how your climate change story matters through striking or local visuals of impacts important to your audience. Doing so can personalize your message and help it to stand out in your audience's memory. It's also important to select the right person or organization to conduct climate change communication. A good strategy is to rely on trusted messengers. Trusted messengers can be you and your colleagues, but could also be outdoor recreation organizations, faith networks, and trusted peers in the community. You might also partner with tribes, land trusts, watershed groups, local game chapters, professional organizations, or soil and water conservation districts to help you tap into a broader audience. Some voices we don't really want to rely on to be the main communicators about climate change are politicians or the media. Climate change is obviously, on many levels, a political and politicized issue, but it's really those local voices and trusted messengers that are most effective at helping people understand and mobilize around climate change. Now, let's move on to talk about the essentials of developing an effective climate narrative to get across to your audience. One of the most important aspects of communicating about climate change is being a credible messenger, which means relying upon unbiased scientific research and being honest about uncertainty. There are many misconceptions about climate change perpetuated by uninformed or misleading messengers, so make sure you're turning to the most trusted and relevant sources of information. This slide highlights a few resources you may refer to for reliable climate change information, including the 5th National Climate Assessment, which provides the best available science and research in an accessible format with clear takeaways and supporting evidence. Beyond the national assessment, many states in New England and beyond have produced robust websites detailing climate trends, observations, projections, and impacts relevant to different sectors. Shown here are examples from state-centered efforts from New York, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. When communicating with general audiences, try to minimize delving deep into scientific research and stick to using model results selectively to ground your story. Be honest and clear when describing uncertainty related to model results and potential climate impacts. It's important to share the full range of plausible futures and acknowledge what we know through observed trends, datasets, and experiences, while also referencing what we don't know and what gaps in understanding there might be. We've said it many times throughout this training, but there's no crystal ball for us to know how exactly things will play out at a local level. And that is a critical message for people to hear so that they don't fixate on one outcome and they can better understand the complexity of the topic. Some fundamental facts about climate change that you may want to share with your audiences include: more than 99% of climate scientists agree on the basic facts about climate change. It's real, it's human caused, it's harming people now, and it's solvable. The climate has changed naturally in the past, but right now, the world is warming up to 100 times faster than it has previously. It's happening right now. If left unchecked, the heat trapped by the thickening pollution blanket directly threatens human health and may make virtually every natural disaster more deadly and destructive. And finally, and most importantly, it's not too late to prevent the worst case scenarios. The next step is to take the broad and sometimes vague scientific research surrounding climate change and transform it into something your audience can connect with. That begins by breaking it down. For instance, you may have data from NOAA that shows February average temperatures are increasing by almost half a degree each decade. But what does that really mean? What does half a degree difference make? You can connect the dots for your audience that this implies a warmer winter, earlier spring, and shifting plant hardiness zones, which could result in unfavorable growing conditions for certain native species, potential increase in drought due to a longer growing season, and greater pressure from invasive species and pests. Talking about these specific place-based changes can help your audience move from distant concerns to local action and support for your climate-informed management actions. Additionally, the information you communicate should be direct and specific. Instead of saying something like, "This region will see an increase in precipitation," you might communicate that within the next 20 years, we will see a 10 to 20% increase in 3-inch rain events, which could result in up to X% soil loss, and that change may result in major flooding events that are more extreme than a previous local event. This kind of specificity will help your audience identify the real ways that climate change impacts our forests and watersheds and puts communities at risk. Next, you need to make your climate change narrative relatable by connecting the science to local events and shifts observed by your audience. Telling a local story and including visuals can put the vague effects of climate change into perspective for your audience. Ask yourself, has the area you're working in experienced climate impacts before, such as a major flood or drought? What did this look like on the ground? By referencing well-known events, you can facilitate discussion around the immediate and long-term effects of them, how they were handled, and what could be done differently in the future to make sure impacts are less severe when they occur again. Seeing how climate change can and does alter their home and the values tied to it can inspire thoughtfulness and behavior change from your audience. Finally, connecting back to our slide about reaching your audience through positive messaging, you'll want to frame your messaging in a way that empowers your audience by focusing on solutions and benefits. You should avoid using doom and gloom themes in any of your messaging because it can make people feel helpless and disengaged. Instead, you want to make people feel like they can do something about climate change and to provide real, tangible examples, ideas, and steps the audiences can either be a part of or support in other ways, like the ones you see highlighted here. An example of positive messaging is, we expect within the next 20 years there will be a shift from Zone 5 to Zone 6. That means we can plant certain species here that would not have otherwise survived in the winters previously. You can also list specific local impacts as reasons for why we might want to implement an action in response to climate change. This helps us to stay solutions focused and emphasizes how our actions may be a win-win that has multiple benefits. For example, maybe we want to increase diversity in our forests and to reduce the impacts of pests, diseases, and warmer temperatures. This example calls out the risks and benefits to forests and leads us into thinking about management by informing your audience about how you can accomplish the goal of increasing biodiversity by taking action against the risks associated with climate change. This type of solutions-based, benefit-focused thinking demonstrates not only the benefits of one action, but the win-win opportunities we have at our disposal that may help to reduce the severity and risk of stressors and climate impacts over time. So, to wrap up today's lecture, here's a quick list of some of the do's and don'ts of climate change communication that we discussed today. Do research your audience to understand their beliefs and values. Do engage in knowledge exchange. Do tailor your information to your specific audience. Do keep stats to a minimum, present ranges when it comes to data projections, and avoid complex graphs. Do maintain proximity and use examples, and do talk about opportunities and actions. On the other hand, don't present generic, technical scientific language for a mainstream audience. Don't provide excessive stats, data, graphs, or irrelevant imagery. Don't be abstract about threats. Don't present impacts as only a worry far into the future, and especially don't focus on the doom and gloom. Try applying this advice at your next climate change communication opportunity. This concludes the climate change communications presentation for the Adaptation Planning and Practices training. Please contact us for more information.